I was actually at a pub in March this year, and I was hanging out with some guys talking about paranormal stuff or parapsychology stuff, as I do. And somebody said something, and it triggered this memory that I had of this incident that occurred to me probably in 94 or 95, right? And then, I relived the whole event while I was telling the story. And then at the end of it, it just occurred to me, wow, that was really amazing, actually. And I hadn't thought about it in years. And it just occurred to me, it makes a good story and to share today. It's essentially, you could describe it as a boss battle with an astral entity. Okay, and so there's a little bit of a build-up of how to describe what that's all about. So something that I learned about a lot later is there's a thing called sleep paralysis. Now, how many people here have ever experienced sleep paralysis? So about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. Okay.
I've treated it. Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things that is described about sleep paralysis very commonly is when people have this experience, and I'll get into what it means in a second for those who don't know. My experience of it is you're coming out of deep sleep, you're transitioning through the dreamlike state just before you're about to wake up, so there's that twilight of consciousness, and you actually get trapped in the twilight of consciousness between sleeping and wakefulness. But the experience is that it's not the same as when you are just kind of like, in that kind of groggy state where you're kind of like going, just kind of waking up and now I'm awake. It's like I'm fully awake. The sunshine of my consciousness is fully risen, but I'm trapped in the twilight zone of consciousness, and I can't move the paralysis part comes in because you get that feeling that if I could just move one part of my body, then I'd snap out of it, but you can't. You're actually in a paralyzed state. I'm seeing some heads nodding, right? And it's a very different experience.
It's pretty freaky, isn't it? I mean,
well, a lot of people feel fear.
You can't move.
A lot of people feel fear with it. I never did feel fear with it. In fact, because I'd heard about it before, and I was already at the time. I was in that sort of state of mind where, just a basic knowledge that I am spiritual and nothing can ultimately harm me. So the fact that something was going on like this, I found it just fascinating to study it. And this happened to me about 10 times in the course of probably about 5 or 6 years. So I wasn't feeling fear, but I know a lot of people feel fear, and there's an additional part of that experience, which is that there's a sense that there's an ominous or malevolent entity present in the room or in your space, right? So I'm seeing some heads nodding as well. So who's experienced that with both the entity and the, right? Okay. Right. And there's another layer to this as well. And I haven't met anybody else who's experienced the same as me on this, but there's a term for this which has been around since the Middle Ages called succubus and incubus. Oh yeah. Okay. And so this takes it to the next level, where it's not only the entity is coming in and trying to, God knows what's going on there, but actually, the succubus and incubus is defined as like a demonic entity that comes, in the case of succubus, comes in the form of a female and enters into a man's dreams in order to seduce him. And incubus is the reverse for it's a female demon, a male demon that comes to seduce a female. So this has happened to me, and this was always the case on those occasions when I had a sleep paralysis experience. So I wanted to, just before I get to the boss battle, I'll just talk about some of those experiences and how they manifested. Now, for those who are like really hardcore scientific minded in the room, there's no way that I can ever say that this is anything more than some neurological experience, right? But my own first-hand eyewitness experience of it makes it really hard to believe that it would have been just some neurological thing, because there's one of the other things about the experience is when it's very different to being in the dreamlike state. First of all, because your consciousness is fully awake. But second of all, the sense of this presence of this other being is very different to what happens when you're in a dream. Because when you're in a dream, it's everything very ephemeral and flickering. Things are constantly changing. But with this foreboding presence, there's a real steadiness to it. And almost like something else is here with a real intent. There's an intentionality behind it, which you just don't get in random dreams. All right, so one of the experiences I had with these, I'd actually kind of got a little bit, used to it. I actually quite enjoyed battling them off, and so it was that kind of a little bit of a challenge. And I remember one time I felt like, and I'm operating here out of a paradigm that we have a gross body, but we also have what I used to call a subtle body, or you could call an astral body, or the mind part of the self, or whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different terminologies for this sort of thing. It was actually in Sweden this occurred when I was there, and I wanted to push this entity off me, and with all of my effort, I wanted to rise my knees up and push it off, and that's what actually it felt like that I did. I actually got my knees up and pushed this entity off me, and then when it was off me, I awoke, and then I realised my body hadn't moved at all, right? Because there's that if the muscles had contracted, you get the after effect of lactic acid, and you can feel that something's happened, but they'd actually been relaxed the whole time. And I kind of think that maybe it was my astral body that was moving and pushing this thing away. One of the other experiences, just more on that aspect of muscular movement. One of the things that I experienced on multiple occasions with this was the sense that I'm trying to vocalize as well, because there's a feeling that if I could just say something, if I could scream or shout or something like that, then that would also snap me out of that state. And I'd always get this feeling that the muscles around my lips were really, really tightly clenched. Has anybody else experienced that? Yeah, right? Tightly clenched. And then, of course, when you wake up, no, the muscles haven't moved at all. So there's almost a sense that your own conscious will has been unhooked from the ability to connect with your body, right? And there was another occasion where, so when I was in Iceland, I was having a midday nap. I woke up, this entity came to me, and I was really, really struggling to get myself awake like this. And there was this one moment where I don't know whether my eyes opened or whether somehow I peeked. It was almost like I peeked out of my body. Because sometimes people will also experience having an out-of-body experience when they have this sleep paralysis, and then suddenly they're floating around out of the room. Now, I've never experienced that, but I feel like I peeked out of my body and I could see into the astral plane, man. And it was like, because I could see the room, but everything had a different sort of colour and aspect to it. It's just a slightly different kind of sheen. It wasn't in the same kind of really clear three-dimensional space that I can see now. But I could see into the room, but most importantly, there was a kind of a greyness to everything else, but on me there was this glowing, golden, almost glittering energy sitting on my body, and it was almost like I definitely saw something like that. So I think I might have popped out of my body for like a tenth of a second or something and just spotted that, and then it went away, and then I opened my eyes and I'm in the same room, but of course now I'm just seeing it normal. So that was part of the experience as well. So that's some of the things that I experienced along the way. So now to the boss battle. It was really quite extraordinary because all of the entities allow me to call them entities and not a neurological malfunction. All of the entities I'd ever encountered were, run-of-the-mill, pretty weak, right? I could deal with them relatively easily. But there was this one time I was having a midday nap in a van in Germany, and it was only afterwards I realised it was right next to a graveyard. I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it or not. But I was having my midday nap. I was just coming out of my midday nap, and this entity enters my dreams on that moment of starting to wake up, and coming on all friendly and trying it on with me, and and of course I'm like, nah, forget it. And I actually can remember hearing it like in the mind space. I could remember hearing this groan of, or a moan of frustration, and it went away momentarily, and then it came back, but this time with anger, and it was really, really powerful. It's like it started to start. It was really angry at me, and so I'm really having this tussle when I'm trying to wake up, and then I feel like I'm sitting up and I'm looking out the front of the van, but then no, I'm actually still in the dream state, and everything was just fragmenting. It was really super tough to deal with this. It was more powerful than anything I'd ever experienced before. And it kept on shooting these images at me that was very, very confusing. And then I realised, because I'm a meditator, you see, so then I realised it's playing with my mind energy, with my astral body energy, and I'm fighting with it, and it's giving this whole situation more force, more energy, and they're energy vampires or whatever you want to call them, right? And so then I went, if I don't give it any leeway, then it's got nothing to do. So then I took my mind and just focused it into a really, really tight ball through mantra meditation. I was using an Indian, a Vedic meditation that I know, which is for protection, the Nrsimha mantra, and I just really tightly balled my mind up so that it just had nothing to grab onto, right? Had it all nicely, tightly under control, and then there was this sort of frustrated feeling going on, and then I felt like a sort of this whirlwind of energy started up in my body. It was like trying to wrap around and trying to do something, and it got faster and faster and faster, and it's going higher and higher in my body, and then it got really, really fast, and it shot out the top of my head. It was just like bam, like that. And at that moment when it shot out the top of my head, my eyes opened, and I was like, wow, what a blast. So yeah, that was my boss battle, yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, I guess there's a framework around this as well, okay, which I wanted to explain. It might be pertinent to this, because I had all those experiences in a sort of like a 5 or 6 year period in the early 90s, and that was at a time in my life when I was really, really seriously engaged in quite a rigorous and disciplined spiritual practice. I'm talking about 2 hours of meditation a day, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, cold showers, the whole bit. It was like an ashram life and all that sort of thing. And it was complete absorption in a spiritual lifestyle. And I used to spend time out in the public, and I often, well, not often, but sometimes used to get comments from people who are a little bit more sort of spiritually attuned and so forth, and they'd meet me and they'd go, oh my God, your aura is so bright, and stuff like that. And I think that might have been a reason why I experienced all of those experiences during that time, because I might have been like a beacon to these things, or maybe it was just that my conscious vibrational frequency was just on a level where I could perceive those things as well. So I'm not quite sure, but after that period of time when I'm a little bit more relaxed with my spiritual practices these days,
but they were telling you to slow down.
Maybe they're telling me to slow down, exactly. So I think that sort of comes into it as well. So I just wanted to share that, and I guess a big part of the reason why I wanted to share that as well is because my vision for this group is it's not just all about having the big PhD people, and you don't have to be a qualified psychiatrist to come and speak, but I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of really interesting stories, and a few people have already come and approached me today, and I just really want to make it open for everybody to share. Some people have said, oh, you're going to do events like this in the future. Well, yeah, this is the idea. We want to do these once every 6 to 8 weeks. And I really wanted to create a forum to really build something here. So I really appreciate anyone's contribution. I've left some feedback sheets at the back of the room, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what people have to say about it. I've been having a number of ideas around how we can do this sort of thing. I have a background in facilitation, so I naturally think about things like whiteboards and flip charts and breaking people into groups and having discussions and all that sort of thing. I've also been toying with ideas around it doesn't have to be in a library with tea and coffee, but we could have like you know, because I was at the Picasso exhibition on Friday, and I was thinking, well, we could do wine and cheese evening or something like that, make it really sociable as well, and have some excellent speakers. There's so many great speakers and great topics that we can draw from. So I'm really interested to hear what people would be into. And the other thing is, you know, if anybody's able to, you know, volunteer a little bit of help, I could use a little bit of administrative help, or, you know, video editing skills and things like that as well. So that's about all I had to say, really. So with that, I guess we could wrap up.
Good on you, Russ.
All right.